Hello, lit youth and youth leaders. Ben here with his cup of coffee. So, as you guys know, we're working through a series as a church called Better Together. And I thought it would be a really cool idea if us as a youth group could come on board with this. And so, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making my lessons to work in conjunction with the sermons we hear on Sunday mornings. I guess you could just say that I thought that they would work better together. What that means is that I would love for you guys to pay really close attention to the sermons you hear on Sunday mornings. Take notes, write down questions. If you hear something and it sparks a question in your mind, write that down. We'll cover it in our discussion groups at 6:30 tonight. But just pay attention to the sermons. Then don't just skip over the lessons. Still go on the Lit Youth webpage, because the content that I'm putting down on the page is going to be more specific to you and to the things that you're going through in life. Okay? But they're going to work in conjunction with each other. So, having said that, I also want to just give you a few specific points for today in conjunction with the message that you're going to be hearing from Scott. So, the first point that I really wanted to draw out for you guys today was that you have a story. And the reason why that's important is because a lot of us, we're still young. We haven't hit all the highs of life or hit all the lows. And a lot of times we are tempted to believe this lie that we don't really have a story worth telling. We're like, I haven't really done anything that great. I haven't saved anybody's life or done anything like that. And really, I haven't done anything that horrible either. I just don't have anything worth telling others about. And in a sense, you're right. Because in and of ourselves, we have stories that we can tell, but they're not the greatest story that we can tell. But you do have a story, and you have a very powerful story through Christ. Because you see, you have the story of a God who loved you, who looked down, saw you, loved you in spite of your sin, decided to actually humble himself and became a human being, and then was willing to take on the sins that you had committed, the failures that you have in your life, so that he could make you one of his own children. That is a pretty incredible sounding story to me. And the reality is that the stories that we have in life, the great part about them is our stories are really stories about him. Stories about him and his glory. And so in Galatians chapter 2, verse 19 through 20, we see this mentality reflected through Paul as he says, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. So you see that Paul recognizes the love that Christ had for him, the love that God had for him. And he recognizes what God had done for him through Christ. And what effect did that have? Well, he chose to live his life out in reflection of that. Basically, to make his life a story about the glory of God and the work that God had done in him and through him. And so that's what I want us to be thinking about in our own lives. Our lives are a story. We have a story. What is our story going to be, though? What kind of story are we telling? Are we telling others the story of God through us? So that's the first point that I want to draw out. You do have a story. The second point is you are telling a story. And I want you to think about this in context of the gospel, as I kind of briefly mentioned, asking yourself that question. Am I telling the story of the gospel through the way I live my life? Or what kind of story am I telling? Especially when you realize that as labeling yourself as a Christian, people are expecting to hear a story about Christ. And depending on the way that you're living out your life, you could be giving a mixed message about who Christ is and who God is, which is a very serious thing to consider. But I also want you to think about this from the context of the people who are around you in your life. Think about your friends, your brothers, your sisters, especially your family, because right now, during this COVID crisis, you can't get away from them. And the thing is that each of us has a story. And each of us, as we're living, our stories are still being written, in a sense. And so each time that your story has an interaction with theirs, your story becomes a part of their story. So think about that as you're living through your life. What kind of message is the story of my life sending my family members? What am I telling my brothers and my sisters through the way that I'm acting and reacting to them? Or what kind of a message am I sending to my mom or my dad through the way that I listen to them or the way that I ignore them? There was a verse that I wanted to highlight for you, actually two verses in this. One of them is in Proverbs 18:21, and it says that the tongue has the power of life and death. And so one of those things that tells a story is the words that we say. The words we say tell stories to people, a lot of times even more than what we're intending. And so a simple, kind word can feed life into a person. Think about if you run across a person who's really struggling and maybe even considering suicide, and a simple, friendly hello could speak words of hope and life into them, tell them a story about the eternal love of a God who created them. Or you can tell them, use rash words, words of bitterness, and you can condemn somebody. You can give them a story, tell them a story that they're unworthy of life and unworthy of love. And I know that that's a serious, very serious, dramatic concept, but the point is that our words will tell a story. And it's the same thing with the actions that we have, the way that we look at people. Absolutely every aspect of us, even the thoughts that we have, are telling a story to others. So what is the story that your life is telling? The other verse that I had for you is in Philippians 1:27, and again, this is Paul, and he says just one thing: live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. And so I want to challenge you to be thinking from that perspective. Does your life reflect the gospel which you claim to believe? And then the final point that I wanted to highlight for you guys is that your story is being written today. Think about your life in the context of a storybook, okay? Books are comprised of sentences. They're comprised of pages. The pages make up chapters. The chapters make up the book. You also have plot twists. There's so many different elements inside of a book. Your life, in many ways, is like that book. You see, every moment that you live, every day that you live, you are developing that book. You don't always have control over every aspect of the book. You can't control every plot twist. You can't write out every chapter. But God has given you the ability to have an impact on those individual sentences and the pages that make up the chapters of your life. And so it makes a difference what you choose to do in each given moment. And in each given day, that does make a difference. It does matter because those days make up the chapter, and that chapter will feed into the story of your life. And so I think this is particularly true during this time, during COVID, because of the fact that we are quarantined at our houses. It's in kind of this lockdown mode. And so we're not able to go out and see our teachers and have that extra motivation for doing our classwork, or to do those other active and productive kinds of things. There's this real temptation to fall into this lull of just watching YouTube videos, man. Like, seriously, YouTube has a lot of good stuff on there. So there's a temptation to just watch YouTube videos, or whatever your favorite TV series is, or whatever it is. There's this temptation to just fall into a lull. But I want you to think about it from that perspective, that every moment is an opportunity for you to write a new part of your book. Every day does matter. So, those are just a few of the points that I wanted to highlight for you guys. Um, and just a final verse that I think is a good verse for us to be thinking about in context of this is that in Philippians 4:8 it says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is any praise, think on these things." And so, as you allow that mentality to saturate your heart and you go through the moments of your day thinking about Him, dwelling on those good, pure, holy kinds of things, that's going to feed into you as an individual. That's going to feed into the actions that you choose to take, and that's going to feed into the story of your life. So, again, watch watch Scott's sermon. Take the notes and everything. Write down your questions. I look forward to having a good discussion with you guys at 6:30 tonight.